One of the beauties about having a big record collection is there's lots of stuff in there that, frankly, I haven't heard or pulled out and played for years. But that doesn't mean they still don't reside up in here. And occasionally, you know, I'll be sitting here and I'm going, well, what about this artist? Or what about that song? And that's what triggered this episode. This is an incredible artist that I think not only did I forget, but I think everybody has kind of forgotten over time. You may know her songs because they were big hits for other artists. She grew up in the Bronx, and she was a true artist in and of herself. So let's go to the Bronx. Let's go and drop the needle on Laura Nyro. Laura grew up in the Bronx, and her name was actually Laura Nyro, N-I-G-R-O, but she decided to change that very early and make it N-Y-R-O in Laura Nyro, or Nyro, however you want to pronounce it. She was a very, very talented musician, and one of the few of those young 8-year-olds who became a prodigy and could play piano and could write songs. And she wrote her first song when she was 8 years old. She taught herself how to play piano by listening to her mother's records of Judy Garland, Billie Holiday, and other greats like that, Nina Simone, and she absorbed it all and translated it into her fingers onto those keyboards. Now, at this time, if you grew up in the Bronx, it was very popular for young teenagers to hang out on street corners and sing doo-wop. And of course, one of those bunch of teenagers who then went on to great fame was Dion and the Belmonts, and they were right there at the street corner in the Bronx. Well, Laura Nyro did that as well, but I haven't been able to find if she ever knew Dion and the Belmonts, but I would guess that probably she did. In 1966, Laura Nyro was only 17 years old when she was offered a recording contract with Verve Folkways, and they put out her first album called More Than a New Discovery. When you listen to Laura Nyro, it's obvious that her piano and vocal skills are amazing. She can go from a plaintive, vulnerable whisper to a full-out wail, all in the same verse. You might remember some of these songs from the hits that other artists had with them. Blood, Sweat, and Tears had a big hit with And When I Die. It went to number 2. The Fifth Dimension had a big hit with Wedding Bell Blues, which went to number 1. And Barbra Streisand hit gold with Stony End, which went to number 6. Shortly thereafter, at the age of 19, the young Laura Nyro makes her first professional appearance, appearing at a coffee house in San Francisco. And surprisingly, and what's often overlooked, is she appeared at the seminal Monterey Pop Festival, which made stars out of everyone, but unfortunately not so much Laura Nyro, because apparently her set, which was somewhat subdued and somber of her on the piano, really did not go over that well with the audience. But soon after that, a very young David Geffen, who was going to set up eventually his own record label, but not yet, decided that he would create a music publishing company, and he wanted Laura Nyro to be a partner in it. It was called Tuna Fish Music, and they set it up as a 50-50 split on all their profits. Now, at this time, Blood, Sweat, and Tears had a huge hit with their first album, Child is the Father of the Man, which was basically Al Kooper's creation. But then, for whatever reasons, and there's lots of stories behind this, Al Kooper is no longer in Blood, Sweat, and Tears. So for a brief moment, Laura Nyro really contemplates becoming the lead singer for Blood, Sweat, and Tears. But David Geffen tells her, don't do that. I guess it's up to you to decide, was that a good decision on Geffen's part or not? But Geffen was able to get her a new recording contract with Columbia Records. And the first album that they release is a monumental record, which is called Eli and the 13th Confession. The themes on this album are passion, love, romance, death, and drugs. Well, that pretty much sums it up. Again, other artists had hits with the song on this album. Three Dog Night hit it big with Eli's Coming. It goes to number 10. And The Fifth Dimension takes Stone Soul Picnic all the way to number 3. But the album can only hit 181 on the charts. But pretty cool musicians like Elton John and Todd Rundgren have said that this album greatly influenced their musical careers. Laura follows this with her best-selling album, which is called New York Tenderberry. I like the opener, You Don't Love Me When I Cry, Mercy on Broadway, Save the Country, Time and Love, and of course the title song, New York Tenderberry. Again, The Fifth Dimension had a hit with their cover of Save the Country, which hit number 27 on the charts. Laura then does 2 concerts at Carnegie Hall, which are very well received. But then she and David Geffen decide to sell Tuna Fish Music. Now remember, they were 50-50 partners. They sold it for $4.5 million, which made them both instant millionaires. Laura's next album is her 4th, and it's released in 1970. It's called Christmas and the Beads of Sweat. This album is a closing of the trilogy that started with Eli and the 13th Confession and New York Tenderberry. This album forms a bridge in tone between those 2 previous ones. I like When I Was a Freeport and You Were the Main Drag, her cover of the great Carole King, Jerry Goffin song Up on the Roof, which when it was released became the only NERA charting single. I also like Upstairs by a Chinese Lamp and Christmas in My Soul, but the album hits 51 in the charts. For her next album, which would be her 5th studio album, she decides to cover 1950s and 1960s soul and R&B standards. The album is called Gonna Take a Miracle, and I really like it. And it featured a collaboration with the vocal trio LaBelle, fronted by Patti LaBelle, which resulted in a long-time friendship between the 2 women. Tracks include I Met Him on a Sunday, The Bells, and Monkey Time Dancing in the Street, which I like. The great You Really Got a Hold on Me, Spanish Harlem, Jimmy Mack, Nowhere to Run, and of course, It's Gonna Take a Miracle. The album was a hit. It reached 46 on the charts. But then Laura decides to get married, so she steps away from music for over 4 years. But as we've seen time and time again, retirement doesn't really mean anything, because 5 years later, she's now divorced and wants to make music again. So she records an album called Smile, which has a lot of Chinese influence and exotic instruments. After this album, Laura goes back to the studio and starts working on another album called Nested. To support this album, Laura goes out on tour, but she's heavily pregnant with her son Gil, who is born just 2 months after the album is released. The album was accepted by the critics but ignored by the public. And given that failure of the record and the birth of her son, Laura decides to retire again. She's out of the limelight for another 5 years, and then in 1984 she decides to release an album called Mother's Spiritual. It's met with mixed reviews and could only reach 182 on the charts. But Laura decides to go on tour, and in 1993 she releases Walk the Dog and Light the Light, and sales are poor. She continues to perform live, and then in 1966 she's diagnosed with ovarian cancer, which is what killed her mother. And just a year later, in 1997, at the age of 49, which was the same age as her mother, when she died, Laura Nyro dies. Now, as usual, I've created a Spotify playlist where you can listen to some of the songs that I've talked about in this episode. And here's the link, and I'll also put it in the comments below. Laura Nyro is one of those singer-songwriters, pianists, and you also can think of Carole King as being another one that had great influence on a number of artists beyond her own particular career. The musicians she influenced were Elton John, Elvis Costello, Todd Rundgren, Patti Smith, Kate Bush, Bette Midler, Jackson Browne, and a very young Alice Cooper. Of all her albums, I think I love Eli and the 13th Confession the best, but there are some gems on New York T-Berry as well. And you can certainly go digging through her catalog and find other great songs. Laura Nyro was a gifted artist who was taken too soon. Thanks for watching. Hope you've enjoyed this. Until next time, keep it rockin'. If you liked this episode, hit the like button, and you can also leave me a comment down below, and I'll respond to you. If you subscribe, we'll let you know when future episodes come out.